Now, ladies and gentlemen, our next panel discussion is on utility scale solar challenges, experiences, and opportunities. I would again like to invite Sudheer Pal Singh, editor, ET Energy World, the Economic Times, to moderate the discussion. Over to you, Sudheer.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to all of you on our platform. I'm Sudheer, and this is a panel discussion on utility scale solar power. What are the challenges, experience that we have had, and what are the opportunities that exist in this segment of this very exciting sector as part of the Solar Power Congress. For the discussion, we have today a set of very senior industry professionals with us, including Mr. Manu Srivastava, Principal Secretary, Government of MP. We have Mr. Manish Narula, Senior Director, Business Development and Sales at Jinko Solar. We have Mr. Parag Sharma. He is the founder and CEO of O2 Power. KN Sreevatsa, MD of FIMER India. Mr. Nawal Saini, MD and Head of Renewables of India at Brookfield Asset Management. And of course, Shaji John, who is the VP and Head of Business Development, Renewables Business at L&D. Mr. Srivastava, let me begin this discussion by asking you to kind of set the context for us and tell us, we all of us know the solar growth story, and all of us to a very large extent know the kind of role that has been played by large scale or utility scale projects across states, right? And MP is one of the major states which has accounted for a large part of the capacity. So as a bureaucrat, when you are looking at policy and implementation, its implementation for solar, how do you view the potential and also the opportunities that exist for large-scale solar projects in India? That's one of the things that I wanted to ask you. And what according to you are the key hurdles that need to be crossed for a country like ours, with the kind of quick ramp up in capacity that we are expecting, particularly in this segment of the industry. So broadly speaking, opportunities and hurdles both. Yeah, as a industry expert, as a bureaucrat, how do you look at it?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on the issue. I would say that the biggermost opportunity is that all players are on the same side in this. If we shift from, let's say, utility scale to rooftop, we find that the utilities or the discoms are very often there are reservations that they have that increasing the footprint of a decentralized solar or rooftop solar, which essentially involves a direct procurement by consumers, reduces the business of discoms, and they feel uncomfortable in that scenario. So there is some sort of a continuous tussle that you see between the utilities and the solar developers on that issue. So we have very many restrictions there, which are frankly not technical, but are more regulatory. And the focus is more on limiting the growth of solar. So we very often talk of a level playing field. So there, it actually makes it slightly difficult for them to go ahead with those projects. The same is true for open access projects. However, this is one segment where we can say that we are not fighting a battle against anyone. So all interests converge there. Having said that, there are still challenges that we see. So one of the first challenges that we see is that there is a perception, I would have to use the word perception, because we understand of excess energy in India. Because if we compare the per capita energy consumption in India to, definitely the OECD countries, but so many countries which are considered developing countries as well, we are pretty low. So I think we need to do things to increase the total energy demand. Once that happens, the discoms should be far more forthcoming in welcoming utility scale RE projects. We have had obviously a phenomenal success in utility scale solar projects. The rates have come down. New developers have come in. We have so many of them here. There are business opportunities. International players have come in. Having said that, there are situations where we find that there are tenders conducted and thereafter there is no end consumer wanting to offtake that power, even though the rates are very low. So this is on account of the perception of discoms, because I've also handled that area. I was a chairperson of discoms for 3 years. So the perception there is that they're already tied up with, let's say, thermal PPAs. And if they offtake more of renewable power, then the thermal energy is not off-taken. They have to pay fixed charges anyway. So that is the perception that is there. So the obvious solution in that is to enlarge the pie. We have to increase the demand. So the easiest thing could have been if there was greater increase in industrial demand. However, this depends on numerous factors, which very many of them go beyond the realm of just the energy sector. So of course, increasing industrial demand and commercial demand, but therein lies a more fundamental issue of how our economy is going. But there are two segments where I believe that apart from that we can address to increase the demand of energy. One is mobility and the other is cooking. These are two areas where I believe concerted efforts need to be made to encourage use of electricity in them. As far as cooking is concerned, I feel that the LPG route that we have taken has, we have really gone too far on that. I have had an occasion to work in the petroleum and natural gas sector as well. And I can say that the route that we are taking LPG, we have gone far too ahead, and it is no more sustainable. I mean, frankly, LPG is propane and butane. So propane and butane should ideally be used to make petrochemicals. Making chapatis and rice or kodo, actually, which have shifted to in the last few months, is not the best use of propane and butane. As far as piped natural gas is concerned, that is just methane. Very few cities in India have that. And even there, I mean, with the prevailing prices of natural gas, I think we should encourage use of electricity as far as cooking is concerned. The other is mobility. We need to facilitate that in a big manner. In India, the electric vehicles has not, I mean, internationally, if you look at the West especially, electric vehicles has been the area of interest for people who are driving four-wheelers, who have some sort of a commitment to the green path. Whereas in India, that has not been the case. In India, the push for electrical mobility has been seen amongst rather economically not that well off people who are using two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And the reason has been entirely economic. It's actually more viable. So we need to facilitate things for that. So if these two things are done, that can increase the total electrical demand. The other is the sale of power to adjoining countries. We are talking of one word, etc. But there is a more fundamental reality that we have power plants which are idle. We have adjacent countries with whom we might or might not have good relations. But if we can sell power to them, it makes all the more sense for them, and it's also good in terms of political relations. If another country is dependent on you on power, which you can switch off if things go south. So that is again one way of increasing the total demand of electricity in the country. So these are things that I believe need to be done if we want to make discoms more welcoming of renewable energy. We have already said that there would be no more thermal plants. But if there is not sufficient space in the room, the easiest thing is to make the room bigger. And we need to do that. The steps that I mentioned would be my suggestions for making the room bigger, which would then facilitate RE to move into that. And otherwise, so many things have already been done, which would facilitate that. There is so much energy and enthusiasm amongst the private sector. Technology is moving ahead. A lot of regulatory changes have already been made. But I believe if this is done, this would help us a long way.
Great, thank you, Mr. Srivastava, and thanks for that initial comment. It's a lot of things you have said there which are very, very relevant, no doubt about it. All of us know that there is a reluctance on the part of discoms to kind of allow renewables to have that share that that they rightfully deserve, perhaps now that the rates have gone down, and there are ways and means of handling that. This perception of excess energy creates problems, no doubt about it. Cooking and mobility are two areas of major opportunity. How we tackle that is again a matter of debate, and it requires a lot of careful planning. Power exports, no doubt, we are already exporting power to some countries, and I think you are suggesting that there is a need to expand that bucket, no doubt. Let me turn to Mr. Narula here. How do you, Mr. Narula, how do you look at this entire, sphere, this entire space of utility scale solar projects, right? What are the challenges and opportunities that typically you see existing here, and how do you see the growth opportunities in this segment growing over the next few years as a major company?
Yeah, thank you so much to ET and Mr. Singh for this opportunity to speak about my views. Frankly speaking, India market is going on a very fast track of growth, and every party is getting benefited, be it module suppliers, EPC players, IPPs, or even government or discoms. Everybody is getting benefited of this fast-paced growth of solar sector in India. And I think that now, because of the various policy, the decisions which have been taken by the central government and state governments, we see a lot of traction now happening towards manufacturing base, towards allowing a lot of foreign investments. Government has also announced PLI schemes also here, which is also a boost for investment as well as manufacturing in India. So looking at all these pointers, I'm quite confident that India will soon reach its average target which they have planned out to reach 175 gigawatts very soon. I think presently we are around 10 to 12 gigawatt by annual growth per annum in the country in terms of installations, but we need to catch up to maybe around 20 to 25 gigawatt per annum speed. So keeping that in mind, the kind of announcements which have been made so far, quite welcoming, quite helpful for all the players, all the partners in the industry, all the stakeholders in the industry. And I see that the same kind of traction, if it continues for another 2-3 years, I think then the next 5 years to reach to 2030 would be quite easy and smooth for all of us. And there is still a room for improvement in terms of certain policies, which I think we can discuss in the later part of this session. But in terms of the opportunities, yes, definitely there are opportunities available. There are rooms for everyone, and particularly for the players who have not entered the market, this is the best time for those players to enter, be it the manufacturers or the investors, or maybe other players like policymakers, those who have not participated or supported this sector so well in the past. I'm sure that as of today, when we are looking at this horizon, we can be very sure that in terms of all the possible opportunities which are available, all should be honed and all should be utilized. Not a single sector, not a single area should be left behind in this. Sometimes we feel that discoms have a challenge, or getting land is a challenge, or getting certain approvals are a challenge. So we should make sure that all these hurdles are crossed, so that this momentum could be further enhanced. So that's my limited view for the time being, and we will catch up for the later questions.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Manish. You're basically saying a lot of room for improvement, a lot of room for growth, fast-paced growth, in fact. But then there is also a lot of room for improvement in policies that exist. And I know what you're alluding to. So we'll come to that in the later part of the discussion. But of course, a lot of these hurdles exist. whether it is land or capital, etc., etc. In fact, things like finance, if you look at it, our country is, we have some of the highest rates of highest cost of finance in similarly placed countries. But anyway, moving on in the discussion, we let me now turn to Mr. Sharma, Parag Sharma. Parag, you represent the renewable energy platform, right? That has a platform that has grown very quickly in a short period of time, if I were to say that. Where do you think most of the growth opportunities exist within this larger space of large scale solar power plants? And what is your kind of assessment of this area when it comes to the potential areas of growth? How do you look at it?
Yeah. Thanks, Sudheer. So I believe in the short to medium term, there are three segments which will really grow in our industry. One is utility scale, the large scale bids called by utilities. The second is the C&I segment. And the third is the storage. So this, I believe, is in the bucket where very soon you will see tremendous growth in these three segments. While in the long term, I see two more sectors getting added, which is green hydrogen and also the offshore wind. Now, coming to the utility scale segment, it's very odd that currently there are around 5 gigawatt of bids where PPAs have not been signed, while I believe that this is more of a short-term issue, and slowly this segment also should start growing a lot. And the basis for saying that is that even if India has a 1% demand growth, the rough number says that we will be requiring around 12 gigawatt of renewables. This is with an assumption that most of the incremental demand in India will be met by renewables. There is hardly any other source of power which is getting added. And on top of this, we all know that there is a pressure building up on coal-based power plants. So some of them might getting closed also. And on top of that, as Mr. Manu Srivastava said, that the per capita consumption of India is too low, it has to grow. So going by broader logic, the utility scale segment also should grow a lot, but currently it is slightly struggling. SECI has to really work very hard to close the past PPAs before they float another tender. I think some of the things which government is trying to do might be useful in that sense, where they're talking about a uniform tariff. Sometimes it might not be the question of whether utilities require more quantum of power to be contracted or not. Sometimes they might just wait for the better PPAs. There's so much of competition between the central utilities itself to offer a lower tariff, and it confuses utilities and they keep delaying the power procurement process. So maybe the uniform tariff, which anyhow center is trying to really convince all the stakeholders for, might be an answer to this. But yes, to conclude, what I'm trying to say is that utility scale will be the backbone, and then it might be topped up by C&I, storage, green hydrogen, and offshore wind, so many other segments which are ready to grow in our sector.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Parag. You're basically saying utilities, C&I, and storage are the areas of growth. In addition to that, we are also going to have focus on green hydrogen and offshore wind. A major problem area you're saying is that 5 gigawatt bids are there where PPAs are not yet signed, and you're saying as a solution, a solution to the larger discount problem, maybe uniform tariff. Okay, that's a lot of food for thought there. My own observation, Parag, is that green hydrogen, no doubt, very, very important. But I was kind of slightly surprised to see in this budget, for example, there was no mention of green hydrogen. And even if you look at the budget documents, there is very little that has been allocated for that. So perhaps it's possible that because in the last budget there was a lot of focus on green hydrogen, so the government is perhaps thinking that we are going to have there should be a certain time gap that will be there before things start picking up. But that's just one of the things that comes to my mind. Similarly, offshore wind, there was a lot of talk on that some time back, but it has been quiet. The entire space has been quiet for some time. And so we'll have to see where do we go with that. But anyway, moving on, let me turn to Mr. Sreevatsa here. What's your view on the topic, on this utility scale solar challenges and opportunities? And you're a major player in the larger solar solution space, right?
Yeah.
And particularly in the inverter segment. How do you view this, the business potential that exists here?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and essentially thanks ET and Sudheer for giving FIMER an opportunity to express our views here. As you mentioned, the challenges, opportunities that we have in utility scale projects is there are a few things that have come very nicely from the inverter manufacturers and as a segment in the larger view. One is, the BCD and the inverters have been introduced, which helps the local manufacturers like FIMER, who have been present in manufacturing in India for a long time. That helps us to give fillip towards growing the local content and really adding to the Atmanirbhar Bharat as being said. That is definitely adding a few projects which are coming up in the larger scale from Seki, Leh Ladakh and so on. That really giving us the larger footprint as we go. It brings a certainty to the sector, which is a very, very good move from the government. That's a good opportunity. And opportunity that we see is also in the hybrid projects that are coming. NTPC bringing a very big footprint to the hybrid projects, storage, the practically same hardware as inverter is also being used in the storage converters. So that gives us a very good growth, fuel to the utility scale projects. The challenges that I see is actually, in the introduction of the BCD and the modules. So what primarily happens is, it increases the cost of the project. Uncertainty creeps in terms of, when will the BCD come in, when will it go, or, the timing and so on. So that brings in the challenge in the uncertainty on the cost and the project timeline. And also frequently changing ALMMs. People are always have squint in their eyes to see, what kind of modules they should choose, what kind of regulatory changes that will come in, and so on. So these are the couple of challenges, and cancellation of certain. As one awarded, the negotiation goes on, that gets cancelled. So these are certain uncertainties which creeps into the mind of the developers, which could have some challenges. Otherwise, there are good opportunities. There are good, very certain future as we see of the opportunities that come in. So it's really welcome move, as I would definitely agree to what Parag mentioned. The few legs that you see in the battery energy storage sector and also on the C&I segment, we are seeing a very large investments coming also from industry players to strengthen also make their balance sheet more greener, whether it is in terms of green hydrogen or in terms of solar or electric vehicles, to at least bring in a sense of greener footprint to their balance sheet. Definitely helps the companies. I would say that's a good opportunity for all of us, whether it's an inverter supplier or an EPC or a independent power producer. So these are all the few outlook from an inverter perspective. I see. I mean, the pressure on the inverter manufacturer always been the cost. Of course, that continues. That is, the whole sector is viewing that. So that also challenges our position as, how are we reducing the cost of the product? How are we, innovating newer way of, coming out with new technologies and so on. That we'll continue to do as a strong local player. All in all, yeah, there are good opportunities, coupled with, the challenges which every industry has to face to adapt itself to the growing market. So that's our view from the inverter manufacturers point.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Srivastava. In fact, very relevant points. You're saying that there are a lot of opportunities exist in hybrid projects. Ladakh tender, BCD on inverters have been introduced, which is good. But then challenges do exist in the form of BCD on modules. One of the things that I wanted to understand from you is, the moment we talk about domestic versus imported solar equipment, most people only talk about mostly from the point of view of modules and cells and modules. What's the situation in the inverters market? What's our level of dependence there as far as solar inverters are concerned?
See, that's a very valid question. See, there are few key components that we still have to rely on suppliers from Europe. Is one key component is the semiconductor. So as the government also coming up with a policy for semiconductor itself, hopefully in the 3 to 5 years time, we might have a strong domestic player to supply the semiconductors, because that's one thing which we are strongly depending on imports from European countries. So, but other than that, I would say the most of the other components that go into inverter manufacturing, whether it is the sheet metal or the cooling element or the PCBAs, those have been very strongly localized. So if you look at FIMER as an inverter manufacturer, I would say we have a local content of about 70%. So that helps not only us, that also helps the suppliers around the ecosystem. So that we have been able to do that. Yeah.
Moving on to Mr. Saini here. Nawal, you have listened to this entire debate, and I'm not going to ask you the same question again. But how do you view this space, and how do you view this expected transition that India is going through as far as the solar manufacturing supply chain is concerned? How do you view this space? What are your initial comments?
So I think in a nutshell, Sudheer, the utility space for renewables is there is tremendous growth for it. I mean, Government of India has announced massive plans. Even if a percentage, a fraction of that is actually achieved, it's significant. And we're not even adding stuff like green hydrogen and those capacities on top of that, which are going to be further sort of Philips as far as large scale renewable installations in the country is concerned. And solar is going to be definitely playing a very key part of that. Now, as far as I think your question around the solar manufacturing localization in India is concerned, look, I'm an optimist, so I'll say on the whole, I'm positive, or we as an institution are positive on the initiative that the Government of India has taken through PLI schemes and other announcements. However, I would just add a rider to say, look, the proof is in the pudding, the proof is in the execution. If you see these supply chains globally and you see the size and scale of it, I think we need to be pragmatic and we need to give it time to localize into India. It's not something that can be done overnight. And therefore, having a clear roadmap on where do we source modules from over the next sort of 2 to 3 years, or as this transition takes place, is a question that all IPPs, I think, are looking for answers for. And why I say we need this time is also not just from the fact of just the modules themselves. When there are a lot of components in a module, glass, for example, you've got to localize glass manufacturing in India, EVA back sheets, silver paste. There are so many components to module manufacturing, and when India can do it for sure. I mean, India has examples of the automobile and the pharma sectors where localization or domestic manufacturing has been done very successfully. But it's not happened overnight. It takes time. It takes time to develop that ecosystem, and it requires a concerted effort from all stakeholders. Last thing I would say is that maybe one suggestion here is also to really break up the localization of module manufacturing. And if you see, there's a large part of that chain which is relatively simple, I would say, conversion from cell to module, for example. But there is the back-end integration, which is extremely expensive, is profitable only at large scale. For example, polysilicon, mining of quartz, getting it into shape into polysilicon. These, as we understand, are work at large scale, 10 gigawatts, 20 gigawatts kind of capacity. Now, maybe there is some role for the government to play there to essentially focus on that part of the chain and provide specific inputs there, so that you have high quality polysilicon available at a reasonable cost, because that's going to take some time from a backward integration perspective. India doesn't have even one. I mean, we barely are getting wafers lines in India. I mean, polysilicon is going to take, even by the best estimates, 3 to 4 years. So I think focused effort in accelerating that process would be my suggestion in ensuring that India does truly localize module manufacturing.
Thanks, Nawal. Absolutely great comments. You're basically saying that you're an optimist, and PLI is good, but then so localization will happen, but then it will take time. One thing that I want to say is, time, Nawal, time is one thing that we perhaps do not have a lot, right? Because if you look at the way we want to, increase our capacities, so we have added around 8 to 10,000 megawatt of solar, right, on an average annually over the past few years. And the way we have ramped up our targets, it's going to require us to, switch that number to 25,000 megawatt within a year or so, right? So that's the kind of targets we have committed ourselves to. And next door we have a neighbor which is perhaps adding 100,000, 80,000, 100,000, kind of megawatt capacity. So not that it's a great comparison, but then yes, time is short and we'll have to do something. And I completely agree that polysilicon may be, one area that needs absolutely urgent focus, no doubt about it, right? More than other components, yes. Shaji, coming to you, how do you look at this space? In which areas do you think the government needs to focus more to meet this huge capacity targets, that we have, the renewed targets, and have more ambitious, kind of to meet this more ambitious target? What should we do? How do we tackle this entire issue of capacity, fast-paced capacity creation in solar? Yeah.
Thank you, Sudheer, and good afternoon to everybody. As Nawal told, I am also too optimistic on this industry, having bet on it for last 10 years. So naturally, I see a big opportunity. The background in which we are today talking is when we see the oil price as $90 per barrel, or coal at almost like $250 per metric ton, and gas at $4 to $6 per MMBTU, which makes the conventional power very expensive. So leave the green tag of solar. Even economically today, it is viable for many industries to adopt green and solar in a big way. So I think that was the reason why Prime Minister has gone and committed a big capacity to be added in COP26. He told that almost 500 gigawatt of clean energy will be added to India. So which means that if we take today's number, it is hardly 50 gigawatt of solar, and to reach 300 gigawatt out of the 500 gigawatt share, 300 if we have to reach in solar, we are talking about 30 gigawatt per year of capacity addition in the country. And that has to come from various segments. Today, it is only driven through the RPO, but like Parag also touched upon, the commercial segment will have to come up, and we are seeing the traction to it. The real estate business which L&T runs, we see a constant demand from the end consumer, whether it is IT or other services. They want to adopt renewables. So that is another segment which will emerge. Then EV is another thing which Manu Saab has already touched upon, almost like 20 lakh vehicles to be added by 2026. It's a big target. And that will draw a lot of demand, create a lot of demand for green power. Next big segment which I see is the data center. Just to give an example, L&T's own data center which we are planning in South, one single data center in a small space is a guzzler of energy, almost like 120 megawatt. So like that, many companies have come with data center plan because government has put the restriction that you cannot reside the national data outside the country. They want the data to be resided inside the country. So many data centers will come up, and they're all energy guzzlers. In my view, it's data and energy. There's two things in that business I see. And finally, like most of the friends have touched upon about the green hydrogen. I am very, very optimistic about the green hydrogen. There are mathematics again to solve that. Today it is $4 to $5 per kg. Whether we can reach $2 per kg, then only the green hydrogen will become viable. And we see that by year 26 or 27, that break even should happen, which means that up to 2026, hydrogen to really come up, government intervention will be needed. So we'll touch upon that part. So these are the various segments which I see the growth, the way which we can reach 300 gigawatt of utility scale solar. Now coming to the challenge in short term, the biggest challenge I see is the supply chain uncertainty. Basically, we have to insulate ourselves from the global cross-border issues, which means that we have to depend on make in India. Nice step has been taken by the government and industry is participating, the PLI scheme. I think this still remains an issue, though there's a solution of PLI, but 3 gigawatt of cell line today, and if you have to reach 30, 40 gigawatt capacity addition, you can imagine 10 times scale up is needed. And it's not easy. Like Nawal was also telling, the implementation will be the key. Whether really we will be able to implement those capacities on ground. So that is a challenge which I see. Second challenge, which I see in very short term, is the BCD and ALMM. There also, the uncertainty is actually killing the industry. Today, I think we are getting more closer to the certainty, but once it becomes certain, then whether we will be able to build those BCD and other taxes, etc., and the tariff will be good enough for making fair returns, or the off-taker should have uh, demand at the higher tariff. So I think that will be the second challenge which I see. Third challenge is little long term, that how capacity addition of 300 gigawatt the grid will view. That means the kind of stability which will be needed in a grid with stable power like coal and gas. The fluctuating power of solar and wind can create sort of technical issues. And also the scheduling, whether you can plan and schedule and give the power to the grid like any conventional power is able to do it. So there comes a solution of the hybrids and storage. So that is a solution for this challenge. So these are the three challenges which I see. Government should focus more on, like already Nawal touched upon, the back end of the industry, polysilicon. I think it will not be easy game for a private player to come into that space that easily, because the scale requirement is very big, number one. Number two, the cost of capital and cost of energy to produce the polysilicon is prohibitive in India. So that one idea which we discussed with government agencies is that why don't we tie up with governments in Saudi or UAE, where the silica is there, cheap power is there, cheap capital is there. We can set up polysilicon plant there and bring it free trade basis to India without any restrictions, and give it to the module manufacturing segment so that it can be useful. So this is one area where government intervention will be needed, cannot be handled by the private. Maybe second part is giving more clarity in the hydrogen policy at the earliest, so that this industry can be really fast tracked and feed many other back end industries like solar and wind and batteries. I think I will limit myself to that right now.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Shaji. Great comments. And you're basically saying multiple areas of problems that exist here: supply chain, BCD and ALMM. These are things which add a lot of uncertainty to a business, which, I would say, which is already not that certain, right? Technology is changing very, very fast in solar, and we have to be constantly on our toes. And if you add more uncertainty to it from the policy point of view, it becomes slightly difficult for investors to handle that. But aren't we slightly more clear on BCD and ALMM now as compared to what we were, let's say, a year back or 6 months back? The government is saying that, this is the date, this is the amount of duty, we are going to impose it. Absolutely fine. Even ALMM, I think they're expanding the list slowly, gradually. But then we can discuss these things later in the discussion. You're saying, one very, very valid point is grid stability. Is the grid ready, right? And data centers, no doubt. Now we have infrastructure status for data centers. But then, they are guzzlers of energy. And are we able to take the right steps to ensure that we are prepared, with the kind of boom that is going to happen there with crypto, etc. So very, very interesting points. Let me turn again and go back to Mr. Srivastava and take his views on, he has been listening to this entire conversation. First of all, some of the first thing that I want to understand from you is whether you want to comment on a lot of these things that other panelists have talked about. And secondly, also, if you could brief us on what has been the experience of MP, when it comes to implementing your own ambitious solar agenda. I remember talking to you recently where you were talking about how there's a lot of focus on, government buildings of solar rooftop projects, etc. But what more can you tell us about it? What's the larger plan? So these two things, yeah.
Firstly, I would like to add on to what Parag said, that about other segments. So utility scale need not supply only to utilities. So we need to look at customers beyond utilities. Like a project that we had done in Madhya Pradesh, the Riva Solar project that supplies to Delhi Metro. So almost 60% of the daytime demand of Delhi Metro is met from this solar project. The next project that we had in Madhya Pradesh is supplying to Indian Railways. So we need to, going beyond DISCOMs, we need to look at such customers as well. And there is no dearth of such customers. There are a large number of public sector undertakings. We just heard of the data centers. They are there is huge demand of power there, and I would say that we even the use of the word energy guzzler. I mean, I think we need energy guzzlers. That is a solution to the problem there. I mean, you can't be in the business of selling momos and complaining that more people are eating momos. So I mean, we should welcome such projects, and we should be thankful about it that there are large number of companies which have ESG concerns, and they want to have no a carbon footprint. So that is something which makes it simpler. The only problem is that going through DISCOMs creates a problem. So we have to facilitate projects where power can be supplied directly to institutional customers, and it need not be limited only to a rooftop or one-off open access projects. Even utility scale projects can have non-utility end consumers, as in the case of Delhi Metro that I talked about, or Indian Railways that I talked about. I mean, why can it not be so many port authorities are there, oil companies have huge refineries. So large number of such things can be done, steel plants, large number of things can be done. I understand that there is a problem in a government setting up a project and supplying unilaterally to a private consumer, because there could be issues that come up. But there is no dearth of public sector companies as well in India, which have a huge requirement of power. So they could be the first claimants of such projects. So there is no allegation that the project proponent is trying to favor a particular consumer. I mean, no one has ever told me that I was trying to help Delhi Metro by setting up a project there. So I mean, Delhi Metro, so like numerous projects like that can come up. And the other issue I would say, without going into too many details, would be that we need a greater partnership in a development of policy and setting up projects with the private sector. So I would only give the example of, let's say, if say we were running a project. So in a pre-bid meeting, we would listen to the comments of the bidders, and the mindset would be that we should try to incorporate their comments as far as possible. And if we are unable to do so, we should give reasons for that. So we should enter into the room not saying no, but saying yes. And in case there is, because the idea is that someone who's invested his or her capital in the project is far more invested in the sector. They would know far more about the sector. I mean, someone had told me after I had done one of those bids that in India, people think that knowledge flows from power. It should be the other way around. So I would only say one sentence, and I suppose I should not say anything more than that, that what is true for a pre-bid meeting in developing a project should also be true for developing policy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Srivastava. Parag, do you want to respond to it? So you had basically said that, there are 5 gigawatt bits of PPAs, which are where PPAs are not signed. And he's saying that, why not look beyond DISCOM? There is no dearth of customers like DMRC as an example is giving, or even Indian Railways, where, and these are absolutely fantastic projects, absolutely fantastic customers. The entire business is running fine for so many years. It's absolutely fine. So why not look at that? And he's saying,
and I'll share with something interesting. I mean, see, earlier one could have said that this has not been tried. So we have successfully done it. Delhi Metro was successful even during COVID times when Delhi Metro was not off-taking. We did a second project, Indian Railways, and I have been speaking on this to a lot of people who take decisions. And somehow this has not gained too much traction, and I would think it's really a no-brainer. I mean, as Parag rightly said, we have PPAs where there is no utility willing to sign PSA. So I think there is an obvious solution that lies there.
Parag, do you? Yeah, please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah, only thing I want to comment here is that
do you really think this is as simple as this, or what's your comment?
Yeah, so I think the biggest hindrance in selling directly to customers is the cross-subsidy surcharge. And my limited understanding is that if DMRC, whatever cross-subsidy surcharge he's paying on top of the REVA tariff, he might be ending up buying power at slightly higher tariff than what was available in Delhi. So what is required is a captive structure. And in a captive structure, somebody has to invest equity. And there are not many customers who are ready to invest real 26% equity in a captive power plant. So that is the real hindrance. But having said that, SECI has done a great work. There was a time when 15 gigawatt plus of PPAs were pending to be signed. Now that number has reduced to 6-7 gigawatt. And with time, hopefully that will also settle down. What is more important is that government has opened up the open access so-called segment to the interstate players by waiving off the interstate transmission charges. So now it's a question of just solutioning. If some renewable generator can give a solution for banking, then there are a lot of players looking for buying power in an interstate market. It will be economically also much better for them. One can set up these plants at a good radiation areas and then supply power at a very attractive rate. So this segment is really opening up. But just to answer to your point, the bigger constraint is this whole cross-subsidy surcharge, which doesn't let it happen.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Parag. No doubt, cross-subsidy surcharge has been a problem, no doubt. And, so what you're basically saying is that we need more of regulatory interventions to take care of issues like that. As far as RE banking is concerned, I think the discussion is already going on within the government to make that happen. To what extent it's, I mean, where does it currently stand? I will not know, but something is happening there. Anyway, Parag, because we're talking to you, I wanted to understand, O2 Power has a very interesting business model. Can you tell us more about the broad strategy or the philosophy that the company follows, when it comes to looking at acquiring or winning projects, and how has that strategy panned out for you so far, and how do you see it evolving over the next few years?
Sure. So we focus on central government projects, which are driven by SECI, NTPC, NHPCs. And there's been some exclusion, which is we participate in bids floated by Gujarat, or we participate in REVA kind of projects where state government gives guarantee. And the reason for the same is very simple. And this is a philosophy I believe with most of the IPPs are currently following, because the state discount financial health is very poor. So it's very, very difficult to convince investors to participate in a bid, let's say, floated by Tamil Nadu, or a bid floated by a state which is not making payment for last 2 years. So, so I would not say it's the unique strategy followed by O2 Power. I think this is a strategy now followed by most of the new investors. But answering the second part of your question, that how we are changing that strategy with time, we believe that 2 more segments have come up, which is C&I and second is storage. And we are expanding our bucket in these 2 segments. And as I said, particularly because of this recent order in which interstate transmission charges have been waived, we can afford to set up a large utility scale project at a good radiation place. And there are big customers who are ready to buy power from these plants. Only question is that we need solutioning. And moment we come to solutioning, which means that our customer need annual replacement of almost 80% of his power. And my plant is only generating at 28-34% PLF. So what I mean by solutioning is either I add more capacity and sell the surplus capacity in the exchange, or I might add batteries at my end. So there's a huge scope of solutioning at the renewable generator end. and provide RTC solutions to the customers. So this is really a big segment which is growing up, and this is one of the segments that we are looking at. And as part of this segment, we have to anyhow learn about storage, because this is one of the key components of solutioning. And the good part is that not only in the C&I segment, storage will play a big role. Even government has realized that they need to really add capacities. It will help system operators to balance the grid, considering that we are almost reaching to 15% of our energy being there from renewables. So as we speak, there is a 1 gigawatt hour bid floated by SECI. There's a 3 gigawatt hour storage bid floated by NTPC. And we see this also as a good opportunity for investors like us to play in. So I would say these are two new areas which are getting added, storage and the C&I segment.
Okay. Thank you, Parag. Mr. Srivastava, do you want to, add more on, the MP specific projects or focus areas as far as, solar is concerned, or you're done with the comments?
Well, there is a recent project that Madhya Pradesh has done, the 1500 megawatt project that is supplying to Indian Railways. And just responding to Parag's comment is that because Indian Railways and both Delhi Metro, they are projects which have been identified where there is no payment in, so they enjoy free ISTS transmission. Where, as with any other utility, the costs and the losses are socialized. So neither Indian Railways nor Delhi Metro have had to pay for that. So Madhya Pradesh is now coming up with trying to come up rather with a floating solar project. So of course there are a few challenges there because it's a rather bigger project on Omkareshwar Dam, and there are other things happening in the field of rooftop solar and decentralized solar.
Fine. Moving on with this discussion, and I want to ask Manish now. You talked about a lot of fast-paced growth that's possible, and you also talked about how there are issues like land or discounts, etc. But then there's also a lot of room available for improvement in policies. I want to understand, the moment we talk about solar policies and the kind of improvement that is required there, there's a lot of focus in China, right? Chinese equipment. So from that point of view, how does Jinko view the Indian market and the larger solar policy environment that we have in our country? Is the company likely to, also set up in near future a manufacturing base somewhere in India, or so what's the strategy for growth going forward for Jinko?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a very valid question. Thanks for asking. Actually, Jinko has been growing very rapidly, and recently we have done a successful IPO in Shanghai, which got listed exactly on 26th of January, Indian Republic Day. They have got listed, and now they have big plans for investments across the globe using that fund. And one of the preferred destination is India, of course, because of the kind of policies which are there, including the PLI schemes and including the kind of market that we see, which is growing very rapidly, as I mentioned before. So looking at all of that, Chinese management has taken a view that they would like to participate in any of the favorable, policy and the platforms which are available in the country. We are still analyzing whether to opt for PLI scheme or go to any particular state for investment, or collaborate with some other player who are already existing in the market. So this is a work in progress as of now. But yes, as I see, the market is growing. So are the opportunities for the manufacturing companies, whether these are Indian specific companies or global investors who are aiming to invest in India, because every manufacturer has its target to grow. For instance, Jinko has grown to approximately 30 gigawatt per annum capacity. Almost 4 to 5 years back, we were just 5 gigawatt. Like any of the Indian manufacturer, we are in the same range, 3 to 5 gigawatt. But we have grown rapidly, looking at the way a global market has grown and the demand has increased across the globe for renewable energies.
So what made that growth possible? I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. What made that growth possible, apart from the fact that there was demand and you tapped into it? But apart from demand, what made it possible here?
Yeah. So there were certain policies which were there in China, which were supporting those kind of growth for manufacturing setup. As you may be aware that we are quite backward integrated company, starting from wafers to cells to modules. So as Nawal also pointed out in past, and Shaji also touched upon this point, that the supply chain security is a must. So if like Indian manufacturing players, if Chinese players would have opted only to convert from cells to modules, then perhaps this kind of growth would not be sustainable for a long term, and we will be, maybe facing a lot of fluctuations from the back-end supply chain partners, and which we have faced in last 2 years from glass manufacturers, silicon and wafer manufacturers. But to some extent, we have ensured that we have stakes in those companies, so we could tide those ups and downs of those market fluctuations. So I think the suggestion here would be that one should have a partnership approach with suppliers also. Just don't take them as suppliers, but take them as partners. Have some co-investment with them, be it a glass manufacturer or backsheet manufacturer, or even to the back-end polysilicon manufacturer, so that you have preference of supplies available. Because when we talk about energy security, it comes from the supply security. Without having supply security, you cannot command energy security. So supply security is must. And my fellow panelists have already pointed out on these points that having back-end sustainable chain is important. Same as we see in China, taking that example that China is self-sufficient in terms of raw material when it is supplying to its other partners for making end product as solar modules. India should also adopt the same philosophy. And we are also targeting to expand into several other areas like energy storage, as well as we are also have another arm, which is IPP. So Jinko Power has been also investing in various parts of South Asian market. And in future, there could be some plans for investment by that arm as well. So from Jinko's perspective, we see India as a potential market for investment into manufacturing as well as into project development. And presently, I think globally we have around 45 gigawatts of installed capacity, which is testament that of our high reliable and highly bankable product that the whole world is preferring. And in India as well, we have approximately more than 10 gigawatts of that capacity, which is presently existing. We are growing from our various factories, whether in China, in Malaysia, or in US. We have a target to invest into other countries, and India is one of the top destinations for us as of now. However, there are certain challenges which we are facing while entering the market because of the barriers which we have faced so far. Some barriers are clear to us, so we have a clear plan to manage those barriers. But certain barriers are not so clear to us as of now. For instance, about ALMM. So this scheme has been announced almost 2 years back, where we have subscribed to. We have paid sufficient fees as demanded by the agencies. But since the time of submission of the fees, there is no movement towards the facilitation of audit and approval of any manufacturing facility. So I think these are some of the challenges which should be addressed in the larger interest of the Indian project developers, because to manage the supply gap in next 2 years, by the time Indian manufacturing facilities will come up to its full scale, I'm sure out of 55 gigawatt which has been subscribed in the bidding process, at least half will come by 2 to 3 years time frame. Till such time, there should be room for accepting products at limited duty and limited hurdles, so that ultimately Indian project developers could enjoy the benefits of supply security. And then, yes, it is welcome that we should make India self-sustainable. We should have Make in India policies, same like any other country has done. Even China has done 10 years back similar policies, and that's a result of this, that China manufacturing has grown to that level. So this is a very welcome step that India should become a net exporter of solar equipments, and these steps are in right direction. But to manage the gap for the next 2 to 3 years, we have to do certain introspection. It should not be looking like a hurriedly made policy or hurriedly made decision. For instance, I have read in one article yesterday that all the ALMM listed companies which are there for modules, they are not backed by equivalent number of ALMM approved cells, which was a part of the policy. Policy wanted that ALMM approved cells have to be there and equivalent gigawatt of approved modules have to be there. So only module list have been announced without giving that which are the suppliers of the cells which are contributing to these modules manufacturing, and how these modules are getting approved if cells are not approved. So there are some gaps in the policies. We have to address those. And in terms of sustainability of Indian market vis-a-vis global investment from the manufacturing community, we have seen now several American, several South Asian investors have shown interest in this PLI scheme. Some are directly coming here. Some are having partnerships. I think by the time we get the LOAs for these schemes of PLI, we'll see, there are many serious players who are making efforts towards India making as a hub for their own manufacturing base for now. So that's my limited approach on this. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Manish. And very rightly said, it is this period of transition that we have to manage, and how we handle that transition will go very far in deciding where do we stand a few years from now when it comes to having a sound local manufacturing base. Let me turn to Nawal at this point and ask you, Brookfield has, is a very, very active player in the entire solar space. You even have a global transition fund which is focused on transitions towards net zero for countries like India. Where does Brookfield see opportunities to deploy this entire capital in the energy transition space in India? What's the larger view there?
Thanks, Sudheer. So maybe just a quick word on what this fund is and what Brookfield does in renewables. So globally, if we keep the fund aside for now, we're about 20 odd gigawatts of operating renewable capacity across 5 continents, and we have a development pipeline of another 50 gigawatt, which hopefully we will bring into a construction and operation phase over the next 3 to 5 years. What we have done on top of that is very recently raised, as you rightly mentioned, a Brookfield Global Transition Fund, which is a $15 billion fund. We've done the first close to 10 billion. So this money will be hopefully fully raised by in the next quarter or so. What's interesting about this fund is it's leveraging our decades-old renewable experience. But what it's really talking about is accelerating the transition of governments, corporates, institutions to a net zero phase as soon as possible. So what does that mean? And again, I'll try and explain it with an example because it's easier that way. Traditionally, I could, for example, provide renewable power to a steel company. With this capital, I can actually become a decarbonization partner for that steel company. Now, what does that mean? It means it starts possibly with renewable, and essentially over time, as technology allows, going towards RTC solutions. It means, for example, transitioning these companies away from blast furnace to electric arc furnace and actually funding that transition. I'll never be able to run a steel company better than a steel player, but I can fund that transition. The moment I move from blast furnace to electric arc furnace, in this particular example, I've decarbonized that steel system by 90%. And that's not energy, that's actually manufacturing process. Then over time, we can sort of replace the coking coal in the manufacturing process with green hydrogen as and when it becomes viable. And therefore, what you're talking about is over a decade-long period, essentially you could get to a situation wherein you have helped produce genuine green steel, wherein end-to-end, from its power consumption to its manufacturing process to the material that's used in it, is all green. And that's the mandate of this fund. Now, when you look at this mandate, frankly, the opportunities that are there in India, I mean, globally, the number that has been talked about in terms of energy transition, and we've said this publicly as well, is close to $100 trillion, and we think it's probably more than that over the next 3 decades. Now, whichever way you cut it, India is going to be a significant market as far as energy transition is concerned. I mean, Mr. Srivastava spoke about Delhi Metro and Indian Railways, and that's a great example. Can you essentially what this fund would potentially could do is not only look at making the energy part of Indian Railways green through providing hopefully over time round the clock renewable power, but could we replace diesel engines with electric engines, for example, and therefore the locomotives themselves are not guzzlers of hydrocarbon. And again, these are examples, but once you start applying these to various industries that are there in India, we can be the decarbonizing partner for many industries that are there in India. You could call it cement, steel, even the manufacturing of solar modules, as and when the back end comes up, can the energy transition there be green? And we can fund that as well. So I think it's tremendous opportunities. It's going to take time. Some sectors are more ready than others. India is a quagmire of regulation, state versus center. You have to work around all of that. But as a global long-term player, we already, in a short span of time of 3 to 4 years, we're about 2.5 gigawatts of assets in India. And that's, I think, a fraction of what we can be in India, given the mandate of our fund. And we think that there's tremendous opportunities wherever there is a scope to decarbonize. Because essentially what we are doing is we're answering the question, how? If someone has figured out what they want to do, or is trying to figure out what it is that they want. So that's really the mandate of our fund, and we see tremendous opportunities across sectors.
Okay, fine. Thank you for that comment, Nawal. I would really love to hear more on the scope, etc., of that fund, scope and size of that fund, and what exactly has happened since we launched it. It's a very exciting space, no doubt. But then yes, there are limits of time imposed on us. Mr. Sreevatsa, what can you tell us about about the inverter segment? That's a very interesting business area when it comes to solar supply chain, right? From the equipment point of view, what is the profile like? What is the larger growth strategy? How bullish are you on growth in this segment? And with the kind of increased focus that we have had so far at the national level on things like energy storage and even the associated technologies, how does the company see this business growing over years or over time?
Yeah, taking the cue from everyone that we heard so far. See, the innovation actually begins at home. So if you have to be energy neutral, what we are seeing a major shift, particularly in the southern part of India, is, if you look at my home today, I have an inverter which is backed up with, lithium-ion battery. So I'm energy neutral. If Bescom doesn't give me power for 2 days, 3 days, I couldn't care less. I'm practically, I can be off the grid for 3 days, no problem. So this thing has to come into everyone's mind as to what I can contribute as a person to the society. Second thing that we have seen in the last 1-2 years, a huge shift in the way power is utilized in the Tamil Nadu state. The most of these textile mills, for example, the weavers, the fabric finishers, who are energy guzzlers, as we said also in the data center, they are doing their bit on the energy sector. They are investing huge on the solar. We have seen in the last 3-4 months, 700 megawatt of power being added by these textile mill owners in Tamil Nadu. So even we have seen this in also Kerala. So there is a huge shift that is taking place, either by adding solar or storage. Even we are talking to some of the textile mill owners to add very large storage projects, so that they can be energy neutral also from their perspective. So there's a huge shift that has to take place even from the domestic consumers itself. We have seen this in all the sectors. The second very key element, as Manish mentioned, is people, whether it's at IPPs or EPCs, should look at supply security rather than looking at, somehow installing a project at no cost, what a lower cost. Cost should not be the only driver when it comes to installing such a key equipment in the industry. That's second aspect. Third aspect, if you look at from FIMER, We are the global supply chain factory from India. We are the global supplier unit for all over the world, to US, Australia, Spain, these countries. We are making a huge shift. We are influencing customers to look at a huge shift in energy security going towards storage. We are advocating how to bring in security in terms of securing the supplier base, supplying the energy converters from here, the batteries or the automation around it and so on. So we are seeing a huge growth coming in from, as Parag also mentioned, the C&I space and also the storage space. We have a huge growth trajectory coming in the last 2 years, and also we have a very good projection also going to the next 3-4 years. So I'm very, very confident that we will learn as we go along, to make sure that all of us around the complete ecosystem becomes more green focused, whether it is storage or C&I or even the domestic itself. So I'm very hopeful that we will grow very heavily going forward. The only thing is the key players, whether it is IPPs or EPPs, should not focus the whole project around the cost. They should look at the whole project around securing not 1-2 years, securing the next 20 years. How I'm going to serve my customer, rather than looking at only next 2 years. How will I finish this project under this cost, under this sacrificing some key elements in the whole value chain. That's it from my side.
Thank you, Mr. Srivastava. Last comment of the day, I would invite Shaji to comment upon, L&T's solar business. What exactly is the profile like? What kind of investment does the company plan to do in solar across what areas over the next, let's say, longer horizon, 3 to 5 years kind of time frame, and in which specific areas? Yeah, and that will be all before we close the discussion.
Thank you again. For us as solar, we have already touched 5 gigawatt of portfolio of projects. We have completed and under completion. And in battery storage, we have already touched 150 megawatt hours. And then thousands of microgrids, rooftops, and pumps we have completed already. So that is our track record. We have a very good battery containerization unit in Kanchipuram as a factory, which can churn out good battery storage solutions. And we have a product around a tracker and MobiSol, which is a mobile solar system, and EMS, energy management system. So this is what L&T has done in the last decade or so. Now forward looking, we are very bullish about the hydrogen. We are building competencies around it. So if you summarize what we have done in this space is, like management has now committed almost like 1,000 to 5,000 crore of investment over a period of time to become carbon neutral by 2040. So that is the internal commitment on the clean energy adoption. And now looking forward, what we are trying to do for the industry and our customers, we have already applied for PLI scheme for the wafer, cell and modules, leaving apart the polysilicon for now. So 4 gigawatt of investment we are planning there. And then on the PLI of battery, we have again committed some investments. Exact capacity, I don't have to have it right now to share with you. Also, we have done a partnership with electrolyzer company for hydrogen production, which is a company called Hydrogenics. And then we have also tied up with solar developer called Renew for 2 billion investment in hydrogen space over a period of 2 years. So this is the kind of commitment which L&T has made beyond solar into various green and specifically on the hydrogen space.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Shaji. Thanks for summing it up. And it's such a wonderful discussion and such a wonderful topic that we can go on and on discussing. But then time is not really on our side, and we will have to wrap it up. Let me say that it has been an absolutely wonderful experience talking to all of you gentlemen. We had Mr. Manu who talked about why and how, what are the different areas of opportunities that are there in this space. Cooking, clean cooking, mobility, things like that, and even the need for looking at exports, broaden our exports if we need to really give a fillip on the demand side. There is also a need to go beyond discoms, right? And there is nothing that should stop private companies to look at beyond discoms. And he's giving an example of DMRC there. Very relevant point. We had Mr. Manish Narula talking about how there's a lot of potential for fast-paced growth, but at the same time there's a lot of room for improvement in policies, particularly from manufacturing point of view. We have to handle the transition period very well. The transition from significantly import dependent to being having a sound domestic base of equipment. He's also saying that we need to focus more on entire supply chain as manufacturers, rather than only a part of the chain. So basically looking at backward integration as a strategy that has to work. We have Parag, who talked about how utilities, CNI, and storage as areas of growth, and how going forward green hydrogen and offshore wind are areas which are coming up. But at the same time, there are issues like bids where projects haven't really signed PPAs, and that has not happened for them. So for these projects, and that's one area, and areas like that which need regulatory intervention perhaps, and we need to look at that. Things like, for example, banking of renewable energy. Very relevant points, no doubt. This is Srivastava talking about BCT or inverters. Its introduction, it's a very good thing he's saying. And but then there are also opportunities which exist in hybrid projects, Ladakh tender, etc. And at the same time, we have challenges in the form of BCT and modules, and things like that create a lot of uncertainty, and a lot will depend upon how we handle them. We had Mr. Nawal Saini. He's saying that he's an optimist, talking about how PLI is good and it will go a long way in boosting the domestic manufacturing base. But then we also need to focus on things like glass and batteries, etc. He's saying localization will happen, but then it will take time. One very, very important key takeaway for, at least for me, from his comments is polysilicon. We need to focus on that. If you really look at the entire basket of imports that India does on solar, well, we will understand the importance of polysilicon there, because it's mostly polysilicon there. And of course, we are talking about how what we need is a 30 gigawatt kind of a capacity creation. Commercial segment will have to grow. He's also saying that over a period of time, demand will automatically get created from interventions like EVs. But then data center, green hydrogen, these are areas that we must focus upon, apart from grid stability and no doubt BCD and ALFM create uncertainty that has to be tackled well. With these words, ladies and gentlemen, let me just try and close this discussion. It was absolutely wonderful talking to all of you. We really look forward to hosting you again on this platform. Thank you for your time. Please carry on.
Thank you, everyone, for deep delving into the topic and imparting some really valuable information. Let's move further and explore more.